Welcome to the video explaining how to set up the sender EA or master EA on MT4 VPS. This video is prepared for the master traders using the tradecopyserver.com. Step 1 is to get a Windows VPS with a static IP address. In a majority of the cases, this will be already in place, meaning that the master traders usually will have a VPS already set up. If it is not, just get a reasonable VPS set up from a reputable provider. One of the providers that we are going to use for this demonstration is FXVM. And there is a link we will be providing in the description of the video. The Forex VPS are not that expensive. They are usually available from 20 bucks a month and so on, depending on how big the server you want. Our system requires that you run your account on MT4 instance on this VPS. This does not mean that you must trade on this instance. You can continue to trade on your phone or any other device you like. Just make sure that an instance is running on the VPS. The VPS must have a static IP address. In other words, the IP address assigned to this server cannot change. This is required for our system to work. The IP address must be publicly available. Most of the VPS companies that provide Forex VPS already have all these things. So there's nothing new, but we are just making sure that you understand that what kind of VPS server is required. Now, rest of the process will be explained using our own VPS set up on FXVM as an example. So when you get a VPS, you will basically get a server like this, and you have essentially the admin access. At least if you get it from FXVM, you get the admin access to the server. That is necessary. So let's assume that you have taken a VPS and you have logged into this, right? So the first step is now complete. The second step is to set up a port and a firewall setting. In this step, we'll be identifying a port that we want to use for our copier to connect through. This is the port through which a TCP tunnel will be opened for a very fast and reliable communication with the copiers. This is the fastest way to communicate peer-to-peer and avoid any delays in trade copy. Once the port is identified, make sure it is accessible via the Windows firewall. So let's see how we do these couple of steps. First, you log in, and then you can run a command by going to the Windows command prompt called as netstat-ano. When you run this command, you essentially get the list of all the port numbers that are in use. Now, port numbers are typically maintained or mentioned after the double dots or the colon signs. So in this case, it is 5355, 21, 80, 135. The purpose of doing this is to find a number that is not already in use. Okay? So the number that we are going to find or we are going to use for our purpose is 27015. Just make sure it's not already being used by any of the processes. You can close the window, and as I said, the port that we are going to use is 27015. This doesn't have to be this number, it can be any 4 or 5 digit number. We just picked this number just because we want to use the number. Now, the next step, as mentioned here, is to make sure that this port is accessible or opened in the Windows firewall. To do this, again go back to the Start menu and start typing Windows Firewall. In this case, we have Windows Firewall with Advanced Security. Open that and maximize it and go to Inbound Rules. Now, as you can see, I have already enabled this port, but just to show the process, the first thing you do is go to New Rule, choose Port, next, put the number. In this case, we are going to open 27015. Next, and make sure you allow the connection. Next, and choose all of these. Next, give it a name. In this case, I have given the name port 27015. Put a description if you like and click Finish. So this is the second and very important step to prepare your VPS to work with the system. Once this is done, we go to step number 3, which is to install an MT4 instance and log into your master account. This is a relatively easier step. Most of you already know or have already done this. So we will install an MT4 instance from the broker that we want to use and log into the same using the master password. Now, if you do not wish to use this instance for your own trading and you plan to do the actual trading somewhere else, then your investor password is also sufficient. All we need in the end is an MT4 instance which is logged into your account and which is running our sender EA. Now let's do this on our VPS. So this is the VPS. On this one, I have already installed FX Sway MetaTrader. And I have already gone ahead and logged into my demo account called 2537478. This is a demo account. And as you can see, I'm running my trading bot. This is not the sender EA. This is the EA I use to trade on this multiple charts already, right? So either we can use the same instance or we can create 2 instances and log in. But for this demonstration, I'm going to use the same instance where I'll be running the sender EA. Okay, so now we have finished the step where we have logged into the instance and we are ready to move on to the next step. Step number 4 is to make sure that you have an account on the main site. In this case, the main site is tradecopyserver.com. If our copy server is installed on your own site, then that is the main site. So go to that site, go to the sign up link, and complete the sign up process to create an account. You can choose the user ID, choose the password, email address, choose your name, accept the terms and the CAPTCHA, and continue with the next steps. For this demo purposes, I have already created an account with the user ID testuser1 and its password. I'm going to use this for the setup demonstration because this is the master account that I will be using for this demo. Once you log in, you should see the menu. So every user of the EA, whether master trader or copier, needs to have an account like this. When you create an account, you get a unique user ID, and actually you choose it at the time of registration. This ID and associated password are used to authenticate each user with the main site, also called as the copy server. Without the authenticated ID, this EA will not work. So now let's go to step number 5. This is the important step to make sure that the overall EA functionality works. So first thing we have to do is add the URL to the MT4 platform in the list of allowed URLs, and also make sure that we have allowed DLLs flag set. To carry out the first step, we have to actually go to this menu option. So we go to Tools, Options, Expert Advisors. Now the first thing we check is this checkbox, Allow Web Request for Listed URL. And here we have added already, but if you haven't done this, you have to add this URL. Where you get the URL? You get the URL on the copy server site under Download EAs section. So we are talking about the installation instructions for the masters. So we are talking about this. So here you will see get the EA, and the URL that you need is the base URL and save activity.php. This is the URL you need. Once you copy this URL into this, check this checkbox that says allow web request, and the second step is allow DLL imports. Now it does say potentially dangerous because there is always a possibility that DLLs can be misused, but in this case we are going to use the DLL safe functions, and we are not going to use or make any misuse of this option. So please go ahead and allow DLL imports option should be checked. Since I have already done this, I'm going to click on cancel, but you will basically click on OK. Once this is done, our step number 5 is complete. Moving on to step number 6. Now it's time to load the EA on one of the charts. Any chart, any time frame is okay. Open the chart and add the EA. Now let's see how this works. The place where you download the EA is again in the users members area. Go to download EA's link, and this is the EA for the masters or senders, which are the master traders. So download this and make sure that you install that EA in the expert advisors folder. To reach that folder, all you have to do is go to open data folders, go to MQL4 and experts. In this one, you need to have the thread sender EA. In your case, you'll only get the ex4 file, not the MQ4 file. Since I am the programmer, I have the MQ4 file, but you will only have the ex4 file. Copy this file into this experts folder. Once that is done, you open any chart, any time frame. I'm going to open USD CHF H1 and drag the EA on that chart. Now, to be sure, make sure you check these tabs. In this, you don't need this, but if it is checked, leave it alone. But this is the most one. I allow DLL imports and allow import of external experts. In the inputs, now comes the point where you first enter the port number that you selected. And in the second one, make sure you select all IP addresses. If you are going to run this setup where all your master and copier MT4s are running on the same machine, you can use the local host only. But in this demonstration, we are going to have copiers connecting remotely, so we choose the option all IP addresses. Now this is the URL to send data to the copy server. So this is where we again enter the URL that we added to allowed URLs list, this one. So we copy this one, go back and paste here. The next one is the user ID of the sending trader, which is the master trader. If you remember, I created test user 1 with its own password. So for security reasons, I'm going to just put star star star, and then you can choose if you have a chart suffix. How do you find if you have a chart suffix? You basically cancel out of this and you go to the market watch window and see all the symbols. Many brokers will have symbols like Euro USD followed by a character or few characters like M or dot 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 or dot FX, whatever it is. So that part that follows is called the chart suffix. In our case, there is no suffix, so we're going to just leave it blank. Once you add this, I have saved it as a set file, and then we click OK. Once we add the EA, basically the EA is scanning through all the trades and going through all the history, because this is a big account which I'm using. If you're using a new account, you will not have this situation. But at the end of all this processing, what you need to look out for after all the orders are sent or checked through, you'll see a message that says connection successful. And that is what you're going to look for. Once you see that, your basic setup is now complete. And that concludes our video, because the video was only meant for the setup of the sender EA. Okay? If any questions, please use the contact link on our website to contact us with your questions. Thank you, and hope you find this video useful.